There you go, baby. That's some rock and roll right there. I'd forgotten all about that damn record, man. That is punk rock. Combination of punk rock and the garage bands back in the 60s. Woo, that was Paul Kelly and the Messengers. Darling, It Hurts. Boy, does it ever. Debuting at number 38 on my fantasy playlist, the third debut, the week of August 29th, 1987. Paul Kelly and the Messengers. Paul Kelly, they're from Australia. Paul Kelly released an album. It was called Post, I believe. It was back in 1985, and then he assembled his group, and he assembled a group in Sydney. They originally called themselves Paul Kelly and the Colored Girls, and they did that as a spoof, as a joke on Lou Reed's hit back in 1973 called Take a Walk on the Wild Side. If you remember that song, there was a part in that song, that refrain that goes, and all the colored girls sang do 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 do. So they called themselves Paul Kelly and the Colored Girls. They worked on their debut album. It was a double album. 24 tracks on that album. They were whipping up some rock and roll big time. Stewing it up, baby. Cooking it. Gotta have that rock and roll. Can't be all just soft and easy listening music. And it was put out in 1987 in Australia. It might have been 1986 in Australia. And the song Darling It Hurts. Darling It Hurts is about, I believe is a personal song. Paul Kelly, about his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend who turned to prostitution. Ooh, man, it drives it hard. The theme just comes in. And when the album itself, when the album was released here in the States, it was trimmed to 15 cuts. And it did pretty good on the modern rock charts, on the alternative charts, or whatever you want to call it. It did go on top 40. But Paul Kelly and, they changed their names from Paul Kelly and the Colored Girls to Paul Kelly and the Messengers. Obviously, here in America, you got the racial sensitivities and the suggestiveness in that lyric, in that group name, and they changed it to Paul Kelly and the Messengers. They opened for Crowded House when they toured the U.S., but they left Crowded House and they went on their own, touring America by bus. And this is it, man. I think one of the reasons why I added this record because it sounded so 60s, the garage bands. It's like, particularly when you hear that keyboard, that organ, reminds me a lot of 96 Tears by Question Mark and the Mysterians. If anything sounded remotely like the 60s back then, it got added on my fantasy playlist. So it is, at number 38, a debut, Paul Kelly and the Messengers, Darling, It Hurts.